My title today is Assessing the Roads Programme for Safety and Sustainability Benefits. And I'll say, as you'd expect me to, that I think a major shift in funding and priority from the roads programme to active travel, public transport and sustainable planning would give great benefits. The nature of those benefits is that it will contribute to all three of the great problems of transport policy: safety, together with its closely allied issues of health and security; congestion, with its associated issues of economic efficiency; and climate change, both coping with it and the contribution of transport to reducing it. And that's because we've seen a near convergence of these three aspects. A near convergence, we're not quite there yet. I think we have a dissonance between best appraisal practice and most common practice. So let me do a whistle-stop tour of the last 50 years in economic cost-benefit analysis of transport policies and projects. The key flaw in classical economics is that not all costs or benefits are included in price, especially the social costs which individuals, in pursuit of what they see as their own best interests, impose on other individuals as an unintended consequence of their actions. The two earliest examples of this were congestion and safety. Congestion was addressed by the twin concepts of the speed flow curve and the value of time, which could be costed and included in the costs and benefits of schemes. By the end of the 1960s, there was an elaborate official calculus in which the estimated value of time savings delivered by building or expanding roads was the core of the case for spending public money. In 1989, this launched the biggest road programme since the Romans, called Roads for Prosperity. But in less than 5 years, it had collapsed, because it could not cure congestion. The forecast traffic growth was greater than any road programme could keep pace with, and therefore demand management replaced it in theory. To tackle congestion, you had to tackle traffic growth. This was established 20 years ago, though governments have forgotten it from time to time. Parallel change was happening to safety. There were losses to the economy from traffic accidents. Of course, we would now say more carefully traffic collisions. Loss of production by death and injury, plus the costs of repairs, ambulances, hospital care and policing. This was tricky in the beginning. The original assumption was that your net contribution to the economy was the value of your production over your life minus the value of your consumption. But then calculations showed that women, on average, had a negative economic value because their production, as shown by their pay, was less than their share in consumption. Also, young children had a negative value because they consumed now but would only produce in a distant, discounted future. Also, retired people, both men and women, had a negative value because they no longer produced at all. Only men of working age in employment had a positive value, wrote some men of working age in employment. Now, this problem was resolved. No longer the net idea is applied. though the issue still lurks. But to this day, safety values typically represent less than 10% of the money benefits that are given by congestion. And to this day, neither treats seriously that the longer-term economic costs of a car-dependent lifestyle and the concept that physical movement and the observed numbers of crashes are adequate measures of the costs and benefits do not apply. To these great issues of social cost, we now add environmental costs of the effect of carbon dioxide on climate, in which traffic, especially car use, are the major emitters. For years, the government persisted in saying that carbon, though of course important, was so small in size and value that it was not a material consideration in roads provision. And really only the electrification of vehicles mattered. They're important, of course, but so are roads. The claim is hanging on by its fingernails now, since an updating last year which very substantially raised the economic value of carbon, quite rightly, with an implicit statement that carbon has been very substantially undervalued in all appraisals until now. There are many other emissions and transport activities which harm health, with impacts on stress, heart conditions, asthma and obesity. These are making their way into transport policy, but there is still the view that it's not primarily a transport problem because it's covered in the health budget. We are, however, close, I think. So in principle, now have all three types of cost entering the calculations: congestion and safety and the environment. But still, congestion has dominated, with 70% or more of the benefits, and downplaying the problem of whether the time savings are actually achieved. Then, vehicle operating costs and both safety and environmental costs are tucked in at the bottom, big in the rhetoric, but small in the arithmetic. That no longer has to be true. Science and economics have now given us a much more balanced estimate for all these costs, and the barrier is only determination to use them. So what happens when we include these factors? Over 10 years ago, I wrote a paper compiling the knowledge available at that time on all the available cost-benefit studies across the board. This showed that by far the best average benefit-cost ratio was for local safety schemes, with benefits over 30 times the cost. Next came smarter choice measures to reduce car use, with benefits 11 times the cost. Then cycling, averaging about 10. Systems of automatic control of vehicle speed, not to exceed the speed limit, averaged 8. And then a large group of bus, rail and road schemes with an average benefit cost ratio of between 3 and 5. That's the average. But of course, when it comes to allocation of funds, you should not do it by average. In each category, some schemes will be much better than their average, and you should look for the best schemes in each category and do those before moving on to the next. Local safety schemes are mostly low cost, so you can do a lot of these for the price of one major road scheme. Heavy infrastructure tends to have a small number of well-performing schemes, but a very large number of very costly schemes with very little benefit. And the result is that the first claim on available funds should be for the transport initiatives that make the best contribution to climate, safety and economic benefits, not the last claim. The climate safety demand management agenda has such high benefits in carbon, in health and in efficient movement that it gives greater overall benefits at less cost. My whole study needs updating. The figures have changed a bit since then, but it will reinforce its conclusions, not undermine them. So where are we now? It's a mixed picture. The policies contained in the government's carbonisation plan mostly precisely fit this agenda, with a definite move from car use to active travel and public transport and a reduction in car use, explicitly for urban conditions, implicitly, though ambiguously, for interurban. Embedding transport decarbonisation in spatial planning would be a very important step forward. This all fits my argument, but what's missing? The first thing that's missing is a cognitive dissonance when it comes to the road programme, which is very assertively defended, even though without logical substance to the defence. It's all based on a business as usual presumption of traffic growth, which is now a vanishingly improbable scenario, and an underestimate of the carbon impacts and health impacts. Wales has got it right, I think, a pause on all the schemes so that they can be reappraised properly, professionally, against the new agenda. Also missing a coherent view on speed, which should come down as a contribution to all three agendas, and road pricing, which also fits all three agendas, and a fourth one as well, government funding. This can all be done in a way which enhances the quality of life and business efficiency and the convenience and reliability of travel. It's not a hair-shirt plan, though of course its opponents treat it as such, and that just has to be argued out. I can't say all this will be enough. We've all staggered a bit in the last few years, Brexit and COVID and now war, and above everything, climate change. Bombastic claims that everything is under control don't ring true, do they? But the pieces of the jigsaw are there, and the underlying reality is that safety and the economy and the climate all need a rather similar package of transport measures. I don't think that has been true, or at least not realised before. It's the first time I've done a pre-recorded presentation, and I'm not sure I like talking to myself alone in my office without even a Zoom presence to keep me company. But thank you for your attention, and although I wrote this last week, I look forward to seeing you in a few minutes.
Thank you very much for that, Phil. It gives us quite something to think about.